Dracula, both the legendary vampire and the real-life ruler. But where does fact meet fiction? The clues are buried beneath the imposing castles, medieval villages, and mysterious hillsides of Wallachia and Transylvania. We're headed for a subterranean world where fact is far more terrifying than fiction. Today we know the name from the vampire monster in Bram Stoker's Dracula. But in real life, Vlad Dracula was a 15th century prince. At only 17 years old, Dracula took the throne and went on to become one of the most notorious rulers in history. Few realize that although he was actually in power for only 7 years, he managed to unite the province of Wallachia for the first time in centuries. And how did he do it? By using the most brutal and barbaric punishment ever seen, which in turn earned him the new name, Vlad the Impaler. Today, much of his legacy and the kingdom he helped to build have been destroyed, but clues that reveal who he was and evidence of his reign of terror still remain, buried beneath the ground. Just 215 miles from the capital city of Bucharest lies a massive bat cave. It's among the largest in Romania, and it's where the legend of Dracula begins.
The cave is from that way. It's not far away. You have to go 5 minutes.
Spelunker Vadim Bondar knows these caves like the back of his hand. He was taking me down into this cave system that's home to several species of bats. It's a world which has never been fully explored. It's hard to believe, but in all, there are 12,500 caves beneath this Romanian landscape. The cave we were heading into is part of a 15-mile network that descends more than 300 feet below the surface.
Okay, Don. Now we prepare to come in.
Yeah.
Okay, this is our suite.
Okay.
Yeah, it's okay. We have comfortable here.
All right. Let's go.
Okay, let's go. Okay, this is the gate. Observation here. A lamp, please.
Down into this cave. It's really kind of spooky. What is it? Oh, wow.
Look at the sound.
Oh, yeah.
Sound of the bat.
Oh, there they are.
Look at the bat.
Look at them. They're all over the place. All of them. How cool. Vadim believes there's more than 10,000 bats living in here. They hibernate in the winter, and in the summer, they leave the caves to feed. These bats only come out under the cover of darkness, and while on the prowl, they actually eat the equivalent of their body weight in insects every day. This underworld was created more than 60 million years ago. Now, how far down does this cave go?
The older system have 25 kilometers.
25 kilometers is the entire system.
This entire system, yes.
So there's many different...
Explored system, because maybe are another few kilometers which is unexplored yet.
Wow.
Yes.
And so it branches off into many different tunnels and everything. This is just one of the many.
And the different levels.
Okay.
Or something like that.
Big jump. Going further down into this cave. It's so cool.
Okay, don't be very careful here.
Oh, yeah? Always slippery, huh?
Okay.
This massive cave we were exploring stretched down 4 levels. So the best way to get into it was to rappel. It's my favorite part of adventure. So we can't get there by the trail, so harnessing up. Professionally harnessed. These guys are good. It was a 120-foot drop that would lead to the deepest cavern in this system.
You have another 50 meters. This is the last level of that cave.
Man, this is beautiful. Wow.
Listen to the echo.
Hello! Jesus, this place is big. You got a lot of caves, you got a lot of bats.
Yes.
It's kind of understandable how people could make a connection between Romania and vampires. Yeah?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, good.
Yes.
So there could be vampires in here, who knows? Why do you think Romania has such a reputation for mystery and legend? I mean, what gives the place that quality?
In my opinion, the first reason is the Dracula.
The book.
The book, yes.
The book was written by Bram Stoker in 1897, over 400 years after Vlad Dracula died. And the setting for the book's famous Nosferatu is modern-day Romania, the landscape of which is filled with caves like the one I was exploring. So who was this real-life prince who in 7 short years left behind a legacy of terror? His story begins in 1431, when Vlad was born. It was the 15th century, an incredibly tumultuous and brutal time in the region. Dracula got his name from his father, who was a member of an elite society called the Order of the Dragon. It was an elusive fraternity founded by the Holy Roman Emperor in 1408. In Romanian, Dracul means dragon, so his father adopted that as his nickname. And Dracula literally means son of a dragon, or son of the devil. The Ottoman Empire and the Hungarian Empire were the major powers, and the province of Wallachia sat in the middle of the two. Arch enemies, the Hungarians and the Ottomans both used Wallachia as a pawn, and Vlad became a crucial piece in their game. When young Vlad was only 12, the Turks helped to get his father back onto the throne of Wallachia. But to repay them, Vlad's father had to send Vlad and his brother to the Turks as hostages. If their father tried to double-cross the Turks, the boys would likely have been killed. But the Hungarians were circling Wallachia, just waiting to attack. And to make matters worse, Vlad's father was hated by those he ruled. So in 1447, his subjects joined with the Hungarians and went in for the kill. Dracula's oldest brother was buried alive, and his father was assassinated by his own people. After his father's death, the Turks released Vlad with their own agenda. They appointed him officer of a Turkish army to help him avenge his father's murder and claim the throne. Just 17 years old, what Vlad Dracula was about to do is far more terrifying than fiction. Romania's landscape is as rugged as its history. Castles and fortresses are everywhere, but none are more foreboding than those inhabited by Vlad Dracula. In the 15th century, Wallachia's relationship with its neighbors, the Ottoman Empire and Hungary, was volatile. Alliances constantly shifted with the wind, and the backstabbing continued even while Vlad was in power. He returned to Wallachia in 1447. His reign of terror soon began, and for the next 30 years, the Wallachian throne changed hands several times. While the myth of Count Dracula is frightening, the story of the real man is downright terrifying. And it all started in Dragula'S. Prince Vlad Dracula returned home, his father assassinated, and his brother buried alive. He was surrounded by enemies, Ottomans in the south, the Hungarians in the west, and always assassins operated from within. To defend his title, he fortified his capital, Dragula'S, against attack, and plotted a revenge so bloody, so gruesome, that it would one day earn the young prince a new title, Vlad the Impaler. At the time, Dragula'S was the capital of Wallachia, which is now part of modern-day Romania, and was the site of Vlad Dracula's family fortress. Parts of the castle at Dragula'S still exist today. It's just a shell of what it once was. But what happened here would cement Dracula's grim legacy, and today the evidence is 30 feet beneath the castle. Virgil Diaconescu is an underground expert who could take me down into Vlad's secret world, and Ramona Niakshu came along to translate.
Hi.
We started at one of the most intact parts of the fortress, the tower.
So this is Vlad's tower, huh?
Yes.
Man, it's beautiful.
Before we went underground,
Okay, we can climb if you wish.
we needed to go up.
Oh, yeah. Wow. Wow, this is it, huh? This is where Vlad Tepes stood, looking over his lands of Wallachia. Wow. Amazing.
In 1462, 15 years after his return to Wallachia, alliances had changed again, and Vlad was against the Turks. The Turks counterattacked, entering Wallachia with an army 3 times as large as Vlad's. He retreated to Dragula'S, leaving a path of destruction in his own homeland. He burned his own villages and poisoned his own wells along the way, so that the advancing armies would have nothing to eat or drink. But the worst was yet to come. When the starving Turkish army finally arrived at the doorstep to Dracula's fortress, a scene from a horror film lay before them. Vlad had impaled 10,000 people, including women and children. He watched from the tower where we were now standing as the impaled slowly died. Incredibly, he actually made the stakes out of the trees.
They were the actual trees.
These were the actual trees.
With the roots.
Yes, it was a tree with bodies in it.
Oh my God. So he left these bodies on these spears for months.
His tactic worked. The Turks were horrified and retreated, crying along the way that the devil himself was at Trgovista. But this wasn't the first time Vlad caved in to his bloodlust. He used torture and impalement as an effective tool to keep order in his kingdom. He routinely rounded up enemies and brought them to a secret prison. That secret prison still exists. It's actually located 30 feet beneath this castle. It's off limits to the public, but I was going in.
Oh wow, look at this. So this is the actual prison cell for his prisoners.
This is a prison cell, yes. Here were held until they were convicted.
I see.
But here we have two rooms, two identical rooms, yes. From here we are entering another room.
Let me go in here. Yeah. Oh yeah, it's about the same size as the other one. This is Vlad the Impaler's jail cell. I don't think I would want to spend a day of my life imprisoned by Vlad the Impaler. Yeah, not a lot of room, but here it is. This is the original walls, right?
Yeah.
Original foundation.
This is the original foundation. We are standing beneath the palace.
We are underneath the palace
Underneath
here.
the palace.
The room I was in is thought to be one of the prison cells beneath Trgovista. It was part of a massive underground complex of dark dungeons and elaborate torture rooms. And 30 feet above this complex would have been Trgovista Castle itself. At its peak, the castle was an imposing and impressive structure, towering 88 feet into the sky. And the subterranean prison I was exploring was built to withstand the pressure from this massive castle up above. While the castle has crumbled today, thanks to the simple Roman arch, these dungeons have remained. The prisoners who were brought here knew what might be coming. They could be impaled on a stake alive and left to die.
You know, it's one thing to hear about these guys, how vicious they were. It's a whole other thing to see where he kept his prisoners. It's creepy to be thinking about being down here by yourself in the dark, condemned to death. There's no way around it. It is a bizarre feeling.
These dungeons, hidden deep below the castle, were strictly off limits to anyone except Vlad and the few he trusted. In fact, most had no idea these rooms even existed. Vlad didn't want any of the prisoners' relatives or friends to know where the dungeons were, in order to prevent rescue attempts. Prince Vlad kept the prisoners here until their trials were over. He was the judge at these trials, and for those who were found guilty, the end result was often impalement.
They were held here for 2 or 3 days until the judgment was pronounced by the prince.
Okay.
And during this time they were interrogated and...
I have a feeling he didn't find many people innocent.
We don't know that. We don't have many documents that say Vlad Țepeș was an unfair man. He was a very just man.
You could be in prison down here for anything from lying to stealing to infidelity. Vlad's goal was to keep a tight grip on order in his kingdom, and it worked. During his reign, crime and corruption were wiped out. That's why even today, many Romanians remember Vlad as a hero and not a murderous madman. Vlad punished these crimes by cutting off limbs, skinning, boiling, or roasting people alive. But impalement was his method of choice, and it was a slow death that could last days. The stake was usually oiled, and Vlad made sure the point wasn't too sharp, so the victim wouldn't die immediately. The stake was inserted into the victim, and their own weight would slowly send the stake through their body. But Vlad's victims didn't always know they were about to meet their deaths. He once invited the sick and poor to Trgovista for dinner. He then locked the doors of the hall and set the room on fire, essentially eradicating poverty in Wallachia at this very castle. But this underground prison was just the first of many strongholds Dracula built, both above ground and below. In 1457, Dracula built another fortress 40 miles northeast, even more imposing than the first. It was called Panare Fortress, and it was the next stop in Dracula's blood-soaked underworld.
Oh, wow. Look at that. He was a guy who took it to extremes. Look at that. Right there on the hill. Amazing.
It's a 1,500-step climb up the steep hillside just to get to the entrance.
Oh, my God. Look at this. Oh, he could rule, he could command, he could do everything from up here. Man, on both sides. It's amazing. The Argesh River and the valley, and if any Turks come up that valley, man, you know it.
My guides, Adrian Sandu and Catalin Stoyan, were waiting for me at the end of my ascent.
That's quite a climb.
Yes.
How you doing?
Fine, thank you. And you?
Thank you. Hello.
And welcome to Panare.
Thank you. It's incredible.
After years of earthquakes, Panare is now in ruins. But in the 15th century, it was a formidable structure. When he came to power at Târgoviște, Vlad's first order of business was to avenge the death of his father and older brother. But it would take over a decade to carry out his master plan. One Easter Sunday, Vlad served a feast to his own subjects, some of which had helped to murder his family. He then impaled the old and weak. Vlad ordered the able-bodied men to march 40 miles from Târgoviște to Panare and forced them into labor to expand his fortress. In the end, after months of slave labor, no one survived. Many of the nobles were literally worked to death, and those left breathing were impaled.
What is this? Oh, man.
This was a dungeon.
The dungeon?
Of the fortress, yes.
Okay.
Part of what Vlad's captives built is a dungeon 12 feet beneath the surface. Usually it's off limits, but I was given special access down.
Be careful.
Yes. Down in Dracula's dungeon. You really feel like you were jailed for life down here.
Yes.
So, how many people did he keep down in this place?
Just a few people.
Yeah, just a few prisoners?
Because he used to impale them very quickly.
He didn't have that many prisoners because he impaled them before he put them down here. Wow.
But there's more. Though today this dungeon is in ruins, 500 years ago it would have been under 4 levels of the castle. And directly above this room would have been Dracula's master bedroom, where he could hear the cries and pleas of his prisoners only a few feet below him. Panare was one of Dracula's strongest fortresses, but it was also the site of one of his greatest tragedies. Vlad's mass impalement didn't keep the Turks away for long, and in 1462 they retaliated. This time they came prepared. They put Dracula's own brother Radu in charge of a massive army and surrounded this castle. There seemed no way out for Dracula. His wife refused to be taken alive and threw herself off the tower to her death. But Dracula would not surrender. He vanished into the Romanian underground. According to legend, Vlad Dracula disappeared into escape tunnels carved into the side of the mountain, and with the help of local peasants, fled to a nearby province called Transylvania. In 1462, the Turks, led by Vlad's brother Radu, took control of Wallachia. Vlad fled via underground tunnels to the province of Transylvania in Hungary to ask the king for protection. But instead of a helping hand, Vlad suddenly found himself in prison.
Vlad the Impaler terrorized his people for 5 long years until 1462, when he was the one running for his life. He was captured and held for years as a political prisoner. But even the thick walls of this fortress couldn't contain Dracula's evil ways. His bloodlust continued in the dark dungeons of this medieval castle.
It is called Hunandora Castle. The original fortress was built here during the Roman times, and over the centuries was transformed into the castle that held Dracula. It has seen sieges, withstood cannon fire, and was even burnt to the ground many times. But despite its active past, the skeleton of the castle is still here. And my guide, Sorin Tinku, knew exactly where the off-limit places were.
This is only original door that we have.
This is the sole original door?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
It's made from oak with iron.
That's beautiful.
This is another area that we are not showing to the tourists.
Okay, private access.
Yes.
Yeah.
What you can see in here is the wall from the 14th century.
I was getting special access into the 14th century fortress believed to have held the man behind the myth between his second and third reigns. But 7 centuries ago, this castle would have looked much different. The old fortress had only a single tower and was built on a solid bedrock foundation with stones gathered from nearby mountains. But in the 15th century, it began the transformation into both stronghold and palace. With tensions still high with the Turks, it needed to be safe, but it also needed to be a castle fit for a king. In 1441, the Hungarian king added 7 towers. He also added grand halls, guest rooms, and a chapel. The unique engineering combined late Gothic styles with early Renaissance, making this castle an architectural marvel. But that's not all. By building a castle on top of an existing fort, he created an interior and an underground. Sorin led me to these restricted passages deep below the castle.
Hey, look at that. Wow, how cool. Oh, it keeps on going.
This underground tunnel was quickly put to use to defend the castle in the brutal Middle Ages. During a siege, these subterranean spaces allowed the king to live comfortably up above, while his loyal army was down below, defending him.
So this is where the battle is waged.
Yes, yes. The gunfighters standing here with the gun hanging on this wall because it was very heavy. Well, we are now facing the first guns in the history, and this one is a hole for ventilation because it was a lot of smoke, and they could die in here.
Yeah.
This maze of military tunnels snaked all through the castle.
Let me show you another part of that tunnel.
But this palace's underground is an important part of Dracula's darker days.
Let me show you the dungeon of the castle.
The dungeon at Hunadora Castle is one of the few prisons to have ever held Vlad the Impaler.
Wow.
In here.
Cool. This is the prison cell.
Yes.
Jesus, these were not nice places to be. Dark and dank, baby.
I'm pretty cold.
Wow. You just don't want to be held prisoner in a place like this.
You know for sure.
This prison cell was small and made of stone. There was no heat, and during the cold Transylvanian winters, the temperature could fall well below freezing. Vlad ended up in here as a result of the constant power struggle in the region. His brother Radu, who held the throne in Wallachia, was allied with the Turks, and Vlad's imprisonment secured Radu's place of power. Much like when he was a child, Vlad was still a valuable pawn. So when he came to the Hungarian king for help, he was imprisoned. Like most dungeons in medieval Europe, this isn't someplace you want to spend the night. It's a dark and eerie subterranean space. Experts believe Dracula spent 12 years in prison here, and while confined to a cell, the former prince kept up with the impaling. He would stake spiders, roaches, and even mice. According to prison guards, he skewered the pests with slivers of wood peeled from the floorboards and displayed the impaled like trophies on his windowsill. Supposedly, Dracula was mesmerized after impaling his victims. They say he would fixate on their tiny death twitches until they finally stopped moving. In prison, Vlad remained the impaler, and outside, alliances shifted once again. After 12 years of captivity here, the Hungarians set Dracula free. In 1475, he got his chance to reclaim the throne, when his brother Radu died of syphilis. A year later, Vlad reconquered Wallachia. Today, few realize that beneath this castle sits a subterranean space that once imprisoned one of the world's most ruthless leaders. Vlad's reign of terror wasn't the only treacherous period in Romania. During World War II, Romania found itself making and betraying alliances once again. In 1940, Romania joined sides with the Axis powers, supplying the Axis with oil, grain, and other industrial products to fuel the war machine. Because of this, Romania became a main target of the Allied forces. By 1944, Romania switched sides, and then it was the Luftwaffe targeting Romanian soil. But regardless of alliances, during World War II, bombs were a constant threat. The Romanians needed someplace safe to hide, and that place was underground. I was heading to a little-known treasure buried beneath Transylvania, to a massive salt mine that could provide salt to the entire world for 100 more years, and was the perfect spot for a bomb shelter.
This is a long and mysterious passageway, isn't
Yes, it is.
My guide, Don Mera, knew the salt mine story better than anyone and could easily navigate these immense dark tunnels.
How long is this?
526 meters we will pass through this tunnel, and then we will enter the salt mine.
So 1,500 feet, this is...
Yes, it
And
is.
how far below the ground are we?
About, right now we are about 5 meters, and then we'll be 10, 15, and
So
most
we're going-
about 50 meters.
50 meters down.
This mine is among the largest in Europe, covering almost 54,000 square feet. That's more than an acre. And it's among the oldest and most important in Transylvania.
The color is surprising of this. I mean, it's quite...
Yes, actually the walls are black. Natural color of salt is white, and massive salt is translucent. But in the Second World War, the salt mine was used as a shelter.
Huh.
And that is why the walls are black. They made fire here to get warm and to prepare food.
During World War II, Romania lost much of its land, and Vlad's former empire was essentially cut up into pieces. Romania sustained heavy bombing throughout the war. Thousands sought refuge in the empty salt mines like this one throughout the country. This empty cavity in particular was the perfect bunker. It was 150 feet below the surface and could sustain massive bombings, and its arch-supported ceilings ensured the shockwaves from bombs couldn't destroy it. When the war was over and people moved back to the surface, Romania was under communist rule. The Iron Curtain wouldn't be lifted until 1989. But the history of this salt mine goes back much further than World War II. In fact, this natural salt deposit is 13.5 million years old.
So, you're saying this solid wall is all salt?
Yes, it is all salt. It's tasted. You can taste it.
I'll take that
It
little
is-
piece there. That's salt. Yes, it is. How much salt is down here still?
There's about 38 billion tons of salt.
38 billion tons of salt.
Yes.
Still remaining in these mines.
Yes, exactly.
I can't even conceive of how much that really is.
On this site in the 2nd century, the Romans began mining this precious commodity, a process that would continue to be done here by hand until the 20th century. Today, the mine is made up of several large rooms, some over 100 feet deep.
All the salt mine was done by hand, so only hand tools, nothing, no explosives or other machines or mechanical machines.
So, are we seeing pickaxes?
Yes, exactly.
Huh.
Everything
And
was
how
done
many
by-
people were working down here?
The most were about 300.
Long before the salt mines provided safety to Romanians, they were seen as a source of income for the different generations and civilizations that lived here. Salt was as good as gold and was used as currency in the ancient world. Roman soldiers were paid with salt, or salarium argentum, the root of the English word salary. The Greeks even traded salt for slaves, creating the expression, not worth his salt.
Down this way, huh?
So the person with the salt was the one with the power. That meant I was walking in an ancient gold mine.
Look how huge this
Big,
place
isn't it?
is. Unbelievable. How high is that?
It is 40 meters.
40 meters, 120 feet. And if I was up there, what year would that have been?
1868,
1868, and we're standing where?
1932.
So they did all that in about
Yes, they did.
50 years. Amazing.
When Vlad came to power, the abundant salt deposits of Transylvania were still being mined. Vlad Dracula also used the seemingly innocent commodity for more sinister actions. It is said that he would skin the feet of his prisoners, coat the wounds in salt, and let goats lick it off. Just another way to keep order in his volatile land. From the Romans paying their soldiers, to Vlad's use of salt for punishment, to saving lives in World War II, these salt mines have always been an important lifeblood in Romania. Vlad Dracula ruled the province of Wallachia 3 separate times for a total of nearly 7 years. But it's what he left below the ground that's most impressive. Over the years, Vlad had gained himself many enemies, but some of his greatest enemies were members of his own family. At the time, there was no clear plan for succession of the throne, which meant that all princes within the dynasty had the right to rule. So brother fought brother for power. During the height of his second reign, Vlad built a new palace on the outskirts of the province. It was a fortress that would solidify his power. In 1459, Vlad turned a small fort in the remote town of Bucharest into a princely palace now called Curtea. He built a massive citadel and surrounded it with his loyal subjects and wealthy merchants, and Bucharest soon grew into a political and economic power. Unfortunately, like a lot of medieval buildings, the palace was ravaged by constant warfare and fires, and today much of Curtea is in ruins. But deep beneath the ground, a small piece of Vlad's grand palace still remains. Gabriel Constantine was my key to getting into one of Vlad's most famous fortresses, and Monica Finlay would translate.
And Vlad to welcome us, huh?
Vlad, yes, he's our friend.
He looks very stately today.
Okay, let's go inside.
Today the entrance is easy to miss. But just 10 feet beneath our feet lies the very foundation that established a new capital.
Oh, it's amazing. It's huge, huh?
This subterranean space is all that remains of the fortress responsible for the development of modern-day Bucharest. Long before the bustling metropolis existed here, this area was a sleepy village of farmers and small merchants peddling their handicrafts. When Vlad arrived, he took an ordinary observation tower and transformed it into a 10,000-square-foot fortress complete with a royal residence and marketplace. But this was more than just a place for local farmers to sell their crops. It was where Vlad Dracula established his slave trade. Vlad allowed non-Christians, criminals, and captured Turks to be sold as slaves. And soon this area began to thrive. But little did they know that this boom in economic and cultural development would eventually light the spark for the founding of modern-day Romania's capital city. Traces of Vlad Dracula's original design still remain, if you know where to look.
So I can see the wall,
Yes,
the original wall
as well.
there.
Yes, it's
Right.
from that time.
But this is different here.
Yes.
All right, so we have the different eras of construction. This being Vlad Tepes's fortress with the river stone and the mortar, and this is a newer construction, and that's much newer over there.
For almost 2 centuries, Vlad's successors built their own extravagant castles right on top of the existing structure, essentially burying all that remained of Vlad Dracula's original design. Today, these passageways snake beneath the streets. But in Dracula's days, this would have been the ground floor of his palace and marketplace. To later rulers, it would have been the basement. They expanded Vlad's palace, creating a structure even larger than his 10,000-square-foot complex. It contained a private garden in the middle, and administration buildings and living quarters would have been directly above the rooms I was in. In the late 18th century, a new castle was built not far away, and eventually this castle fell into disrepair and homes were built around it. Until finally, during the communist era, buildings covered the entire area, effectively paving over Romania's dark past. Most have no idea that this piece of Dracula's life still exists. But if he had never built this retreat, Romania's capital city of Bucharest might never have been. Vlad Dracula built Curtea at the height of his power. But just a few short years later, his final reign would come to an end. But not even his death could bring an end to his legacy. Ask any Romanian where Vlad the Impaler is buried, and they'll tell you about a darkened church on a remote island, accessible only by boat. But like his life, Vlad's death is shrouded in mystery. Some say his skeletal remains were stolen. Others say he's buried near his treasure of gold, or in a tunnel that runs beneath the lake. Whatever the case, Vlad seems to have eluded his fate once again by going underground. In ancient myths, souls often have to cross a body of water to reach the afterlife, the underworld. So somehow it seems fitting that we have to cross a lake to reach what legend says is the Romanian burial site of Vlad Dracula. Approaching it, you wouldn't think that this deserted-looking island could be just 25 miles north of Bucharest. Snagov Island is so secluded, it's easy to imagine Vlad Dracula wanting to spend eternity here. But much of his medieval island retreat has crumbled with time. Donna Matache is a guide trying to get to the bottom of Vlad's legend. She agreed to take me to see the real-life Dracula.
That is really something.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. It was built by Dracula by his order.
This
Yes,
well here.
this one here. Yes. So it is from 15th century, middle of the 15th century.
Yeah, there's water down here.
There is, and it's very good. First of all, Dracula built a prison, and with the prisoners, he built this fountain.
I see.
Really, they dug with their hands.
During the construction of this well, Dracula is rumored to have placed a bag of gold next to it as a symbol of his power. He claimed that as long as he lived, no one would touch the gold, and he was right. Legend says the gold remained there until the day he died.
But the gold isn't here anymore.
He
Somebody
died,
took it.
unfortunately. He's no more living, that's true. Yeah.
But there's one structure on the island that has lasted through the years, an 11th century church, Vlad's chosen burial site.
You can feel his presence.
Oh, here we go. There he
Look
is.
at him. Look at him,
Hello,
please.
hello.
Yes. He is here.
Vlad the Impaler.
Yes.
This is his tomb.
This is his tomb. Yes,
And
this is his tomb.
his remains are under here now.
We think so.
This is the mystery.
Some of the people says that he couldn't have been buried in a church after many things he did.
Just about every aspect of Vlad Dracula's death and burial remains a mystery. Most sources say that he was finally killed in battle and beheaded by the Turks in 1476. The Turkish version ends with Vlad's head displayed on a stake in Istanbul, as visible proof of Vlad the Impaler's demise. But those who revere his legacy say that his friends buried his head on Athos Mountain in modern-day Greece. So why not put these rumors to rest? In 1935, a group of archaeologists tried to do just that. But what they found buried beneath the site where I was standing brought more questions than answers.
They discovered some rich growth, very fitted for a prince. They discovered a special ring with the coat of arms of Dracula.
But Vlad's bones were never found. Much like the many myths inspired by Bram Stoker's vampire Count Dracula, many mysteries surround the fate of the real-life Vlad the Impaler. Today, Dracula's regions of Wallachia and Transylvania are part of modern-day Romania, and Vlad Dracula has left a lasting impression there. But his legacy goes well beyond the fortresses, churches, and even the capital city he helped create. Vlad ruled for a short span of nearly 7 years. Home of Dracula, both the legendary vampire and the real-life ruler. But where does fact meet fiction? The clues are buried beneath the imposing castles, medieval villages, and mysterious hillsides of Wallachia and Transylvania. We're headed for a subterranean world where fact is far more terrifying than fiction. Today we know the name from the vampire monster in Bram Stoker's Dracula, but in real life, Vlad Dracula was a 15th century prince. At only 17 years old, Dracula took the throne and went on to become one of the most notorious rulers in history. Few realize that although he was actually in power for only 7 years, he managed to unite the province of Wallachia for the first time in centuries. And how did he do it? By using the most brutal and barbaric punishment ever seen, which in turn earned him the new name, Vlad the Impaler. Today, much of his legacy and the kingdom he helped to build have been destroyed, but clues that reveal who he was and evidence of his reign of terror still remain, buried beneath the ground. Just 215 miles from the capital city of Bucharest lies a massive bat cave. It's among the largest in Romania, and it's where the legend of Dracula begins.
The cave is from that way. It's not far away. You have to go, 5 minutes.
Spelunker Vadim Bondar knows these caves like the back of his hand. He was taking me down into this cave system that's home to several species of bats. It's a world which has never been fully explored. It's hard to believe, but in all, there are 12,500 caves beneath this Romanian landscape. The cave we were heading into is part of a 15-mile network that descends more than 300 feet below the surface.
Okay, done. Now we prepare to come in.
Yeah.
Okay, this is our suite.
Okay.
Yeah, it's okay. We have comfortable here.
All right. Let's go.
Okay, let's go. Okay, this is the gate. Reservation here. The lamp, please.
Down into this cave. It's really kind of spooky. Oh, wow. Oh, yeah. Oh, there they are. Look at them. They're all over the place. All of them. How cool.
Vadim believes there's more than 10,000 bats living in here. They hibernate in the winter, and in the summer, they leave the caves to feed. These bats only come out under the cover of darkness, and while on the prowl, they actually eat the equivalent of their body weight in insects every day. This underworld was created more than 60 million years ago.
Now, how far down does this cave go?
The older system have 25 kilometers.
25 kilometers is the entire system?
This entire system, yes.
So there's many different...
Exploring system, because maybe are another few kilometers is unexplored yet.
Wow.
Yes.
And so it branches off into many different tunnels and everything. This is just one of many.
Yes, and the different levels.
Okay.
And something like that.
Big jump. Going further down into this cave. It's so cool.
Okay, don't be very careful here.
Oh, yeah? Always slippery, huh?
Okay.
This massive cave we were exploring stretched down 4 levels. So the best way to get into it was to rappel.
It's my favorite part of adventure. So we can't get there by the trail, so harnessing up. Professionally harnessed. These guys are good.
It was a 120-foot drop that would lead to the deepest cavern in this system.
You have another 50 meters. This is the last level of that cave.
Man, this is beautiful. Wow.
Listen to the echo.
Hello! Jesus, this place is big. You got a lot of caves, you got a lot of bats.
Yes.
It's kind of understandable how people could make a connection between Romania and vampires. Yeah?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, good.
Yes.
So there could be vampires in here, who knows? Why do you think Romania has such a reputation for mystery and legend? I mean, what gives the place that quality?
In my opinion, the first reason is the Dracula.
Right, the book.
The book, yes.
The book was written by Bram Stoker in 1897, over 400 years after Vlad Dracula died. And the setting for the book's famous Nosferatu is modern-day Romania, the landscape of which is filled with caves like the one I was exploring. So who was this real-life prince who in 7 short years left behind a legacy of terror? His story begins in 1431, when Vlad was born. It was the 15th century, an incredibly tumultuous and brutal time in the region. Dracula got his name from his father, who was a member of an elite society called the Order of the Dragon. It was an elusive fraternity founded by the Holy Roman Emperor in 1408. In Romanian, Dracul means dragon, so his father adopted that as his nickname. And Dracula literally means son of a dragon, or son of the devil. The Ottoman Empire and the Hungarian Empire were the major powers, and the province of Wallachia sat in the middle of the two. Arch enemies, the Hungarians and the Ottomans both used Wallachia as a pawn, and Vlad became a crucial piece in their game. When young Vlad was only 12, the Turks helped to get his father back onto the throne of Wallachia. But to repay them, Vlad's father had to send Vlad and his brother to the Turks as hostages. If their father tried to double-cross the Turks, the boys would likely have been killed. But the Hungarians were circling Wallachia, just waiting to attack. And to make matters worse, Vlad's father was hated by those he ruled. So in 1447, his subjects joined with the Hungarians and went in for the kill. Dracula's oldest brother was buried alive, and his father was assassinated by his own people. After his father's death, the Turks released Vlad with their own agenda. They appointed him officer of a Turkish army to help him avenge his father's murder and claim the throne. Just 17 years old, what Vlad Dracula was about to do is far more terrifying than fiction. Romania's landscape is as rugged as its history. Castles and fortresses are everywhere, but none are more foreboding than those inhabited by Vlad Dracula. In the 15th century, Wallachnia's relationship with its neighbors, the Ottoman Empire and Hungary, was volatile. Alliances constantly shifted with the wind, and the backstabbing continued.